right, good morning everyone. Today is Tomato Day, day 3 of our virtual field tour at the Organic Seed Alliance Research Farm in Chimacum, Washington. Today we're going to talk about two different tomato projects that we're working on. And both of these projects are highly collaborative. This site is just one of the locations where the work is going on. Both of them are partnerships. The first one we're going to talk about is the TOMI project. It's called the Tomato Organic Management and Improvement Project. And this project is led by Hoagland, a soil scientist at Purdue University. There are also several plant breeders, trial evaluators, and pathologists that are on the project as well. That includes Jim Myers at Oregon State University. We have partners at University of Wisconsin conducting trials in Julie Dawson's lab. We're also partnering with two institutions in North Carolina State University and NC-A&T. North Carolina has a long history of breeding tomatoes for disease resistance. And over the last 5 years, along with Organic Seed Alliance, all of these institutions have collaborated to create new breeding populations and then test those populations under different environments, including the disease pressure that you find in Wisconsin, Indiana, and North Carolina. So after the last 5 years, combining those field testing with some marker-assisted selection, we've created some new breeding populations, and now we're embarking on a new phase of the project. The next 5 years, including this year, the goals of the project include testing different bio-pesticides for organic production for disease management. This is sort of an immediate, short-term organic management approach that we're evaluating. In the medium term, we're creating new breeding populations, testing them under all these different environments, and then integrating more of a farmer participatory breeding to develop varieties that suit regional needs. The last phase of this project, the third triumvirate of this project, is being led by Hoagland, soil scientist, and we're evaluating the element of induced systemic resistance in tomato production. Induced systemic resistance is a plant-soil interaction. There are certain microbes in the soil that induce a response, a healthy plant response and a resistance response in tomato plants. So Dr. Hoagland is evaluating whether different organic management practices increase the incidence of induced systemic resistance and whether or not there's a genetic component to that. Is it possible to breed plants for improved plant-soil microbial interaction? So what we're looking at this year is a number of new F1 crosses, and we're testing these under the different environments that I mentioned, with the goal of seeing which ones do well across all these regions and which ones do particularly well within our region, so that we can then, out of those F1 crosses, start selecting some new populations in partnership with our regional farmers. So some of the parents that we have that we've been making crosses with include the work of several different breeders and many years of work on disease resistance for late blight, early blight, and septoria. There's also some material in here with some alternaria resistance. And then importantly, those varieties are being crossed with material that has good flavor. So the main goal is to have that combination of disease resistance and flavor that we know that all organic farmers and eaters want. Some of the parent material that we have made crosses with include actually some F1 varieties from Earthworks, Jason Cavatorta's breeding program, and he's generously shared and given us permission to breed out of those populations where he's done the marker-assisted selection to stack those resistances, but also integrated some flavor. So that's a couple of the parents involved. We also have some material that's from North Carolina State, Randy Gardner's program, a tomato breeder who worked on disease resistance for most of his career and has generously pass those varieties on for ongoing breeding work. We also have a couple of varieties from West Virginia and some varieties or some breeding lines from Oregon State University developed by Jim Myers. So again, we've been crossing them in different combinations. And one of the goals is to see, when you cross some of those parents with multiple different other varieties or populations, breeding lines, which ones make good parents? Which ones might we want to continue making more crosses with that might do a better job at combining that flavor, disease resistance, and of course yield and looks. So I'm just going to show you a few of these breeding lines in the field here. Again, this is just testing for how they do in our environment on the Olympic Peninsula in the Northwest, where we have 85 degrees in the middle of summer is a hot day. So even though we're in a high tunnel, these varieties have to prove themselves by developing flavor without a lot of heat units and making a good yield and early harvest in our environment. A few of these I'm just going to point out. Here's all the TOMI lines here, these two rows on this side. And you can see even from here, without looking at the labels of each one, that there's a lot of difference. You can see this one in the middle over here is already dying down and drying up. Obviously, those were two of the same varieties there that are drying up. We have some of them that are still lush and green and putting on a good fruit set and some nice. Oh, I should mention that the main goal is a sort of medium size slicing tomato. We heard from growers that this is the biggest market slot that they are looking for. Here's a nice photo of, or nice image of the nice round cleanness of that one there. We have a lot of diversity here. As I mentioned, these are F1 crosses. So sometimes these two plants next to each other are from the same parents. But as you can see, one of them has this green shoulder and is a little flatter and rounder. And this one here is a little pinker skin and a little less green on the shoulder. These are two offspring from the same parental cross. So again, a lot of genetic diversity we're looking at in here. This second one in here has a green shoulder again. We don't have a ton of red fruit here. Here's one that's kind of coming on to ripen. This is one of the highest yielding crosses in the trial, and it does include a combination of damsel, which was one of those earthworks varieties, with one of the breeding lines from North Carolina. Moving on. This plant here is starting to go down, probably the end of its season, but it had the highest bricks rating of the trial, and it was at a 4.5 bricks.
And what does that mean? What does the bricks tell us?
Bricks is a machine that tests the sugar content of the tomato. And so sugar is one of the aspects that we all like in the flavor, the sweetness of a tomato. But we also taste test each line, each plot. And that tasting, we give it sort of the human factor, the human measurement, which for some of us, for many of us, we like a balanced tomato that has that sweet acid balance. Everybody's a little bit different. Some people want just that pure sweet. They don't want a little sourness in their tomato. Some of us like that sweet acid balance or an earthy quality to it. So we do keep track of both of those factors and evaluate the flavor. Here you can see the breeding lines we're looking at, and the evaluation criteria include how easy is it to harvest, what is the total marketable weight, what percent of that weight is marketable from the total harvested weight, the average number of pounds per plant, average appearance, does it look good, does it have cracking on the shoulders, the bricks, as I mentioned before, which is the sugar level, average flavor, sugar acid balance, and skin thickness. Does it have a real thick skin on it? And texture. We don't want a mealy tomato either, right? A few others to point out that I flagged on our way through here. Again, you can see there's a lot of diversity in this breeding plot. This one here is number 6. It is Mountaineer Delight times Damsel. Mountaineer Delight is one of those West Virginia varieties that we crossed with Damsel. Damsel is one of the varieties from Earthworks, and this one had the best flavor in the entire trial. It's not quite as round, it's not quite as pretty, it's a little funky looking on the bottom, but this one had the highest ranking flavor of the trial. And number 7 here, again, this is a North Carolina crossed with one of Jim Meyer's. I think Jim might be watching right now and be proud to hear that this cross actually had a combination of high flavor, yield, size.
Look at those. Yeah, look at those babies.
Nice size. If you want a little bit larger slicer, it's also a beautiful fruit that doesn't have any markings on it, and it also had very good flavor. So, moving along a couple of more, and then we're going to talk about our second tomato project in a minute here. This was number 9. And this is another OSU cross that had the highest marketable yield of the trial. So out of the fruits that are harvested, we record how much weight was harvested and what percentage of that harvested material actually had marketable quality. So that's what a grower wants. When you harvest all those fruits, how many actually cut the mustard to wind up at the farmer's market? One last one, a couple last ones here I wanted to show you is over here is Mountaineer Delight. Again, that was the West Virginia variety. Number 24. It's down here, Lori. Welcome to the jungle. This is one of those West Virginia parents, Mountaineer Delight. 100% of the fruit that was harvested was marketable. That's the highest percent you can get, obviously. But it's an indicator that there's a good consistency in the quality of the fruit. This one's still ripening here. But this variety, I believe, was chosen as a parent because it also has really good appearance and flavor across the board. It was, you know, from bricks to flavor to acid, thick, sugar balance. It scored high across the board, including texture.
So we just got a question asking, is everything in this trial an F1 tomato?
It's either an F1 or the parents of those F1s. And in many cases, those F1s also included reciprocal crosses. So we have damsel times Galahad and Galahad times damsel. And so seeing whether one was the pollen parent and one was the pollen receiving parent, or the other way around, seeing how much of a difference that makes. Again, these F1s are being tested to breed new breeding populations, not with the intent of that F1 variety being the end result. We're not breeding a hybrid. We're making F1 crosses to make new breeding populations that we can then evaluate for how they do in our environment, save seed from them. We'll literally save seed from some of these fruits in the greenhouse and begin creating populations that we can then share with farmers to make more selections on their farm.
Great. All right, so now we're gonna walk to the very end of the greenhouse and we're gonna look at some tomatoes that we have harvested from our NOVIC project. And Katie and Michaela are gonna tell you about them. I also picked some sunflowers here because they're so beautiful right now. So we just added a little beauty to the table. And Michaela is gonna give you a little introduction to the project, and then Katie is gonna tell you about each of the varieties.
Okay, Katie, you wanna come over here then? So as I mentioned, 2 projects. We already talked about the TOMI project. I'd be happy to take any more questions you have. If you're a tomato grower who's interested in participating in the selection and evaluation and breeding side of TOMI, please send us an email, info@Seed Alliance will do as an email address, or Lori@Seed Alliance. The second project that we're going to share today is NOVIC variety trials. So NOVIC is the Northern Organic Vegetable Improvement Collaborative. We shared our NOVIC sweet corn yesterday, And today we're going to talk about tomato trials in NOVIC. NOVIC includes both breeding and variety trial network in collaboration with Oregon State University, University of Wisconsin, Cornell, and Colorado State University collaborating on trials. The project is led by Jim Myers at Oregon State. And every year we convene farmers in our own regions and ask them, what crops do you want to look at next year? What crops are you having challenges with? What are the breeding priorities? What are the traits that you're looking for that you can't find in existing organic varieties? And then we conduct trials with the farmers on their farm and also at our research farm here. So tomatoes is popular market product crop in all over the country, of course, right? But as we already mentioned, we have some challenges in growing tomatoes in our cool maritime climate. And so last year, the farmers decided they wanted to evaluate determinate varieties for late blight resistance outdoors. So we did a trial outdoors, no staking, completely exposed to the elements, red salad tomatoes, and shared those results with our farmers. This year, they decided they wanted to see how they do in a high tunnel and a little bit more diversity, looking at some of those indeterminate varieties, more of a goal on that combination of disease resistance and flavor. And Katie, our research assistant out here at the farm, worked closely with the farmers to pick the varieties that went into this trial and prioritize the qualities they were looking for. So I'm going to turn it over to Katie to share a little bit more about what the growers wanted and how she sourced the seed and what she's seeing in the evaluations.
Okay. Hi. We are 6 weeks into our tomato harvest. I expect we're about 6 weeks into our tomato harvest, and I expect that we'll be harvesting tomatoes for another 5 weeks-ish. So we're right at the height of the season. And we have some early results. Obviously, some of the varieties might have come in a little bit later and might prove to be higher yielding. So in looking for varieties, we work with a couple of growers who Save Seed or Deep Harvest Farm on Whidbey Island is a seed company and sells seeds that he grows on his farm that are open pollinated, and has been looking for a red slicer that he can sell through his company. So we did focus on looking for open pollinated tomato varieties, but we also included a couple of hybrids, partly to just have a basis of comparison. Most of the growers around here grow some hybrids in their high tunnel collection. And also we included 2 from Earthworks down in Florida. We've trialed some of their late blight resistant lines out in the field in the past, and they've been really late blight resistant, but they come on late for our climate, so we thought they might do well in the greenhouse. So let's look at the tomatoes. Mashenka it's originally from Russia. We got in touch with Andrew Still from Adaptive Seed to see if he would give us a handful of recommendations for varieties to include in the trial. This one is from Adaptive. The fruits are big. It has yielded on par with the hybrids, but it hasn't rated well for some of the quality traits. So appearance, flavor. It has a lower Brix than some of the other varieties, although it's close. It has a Brix of 4, average is 4.3. Stay close and be loud. Perón. This variety is originally from Argentina. Andrew recommended that we source it from Southern Exposure, so you can buy this variety from Southern Exposure. The fruit size is fairly large, but smaller than average for our trial. It has had a pretty good yield per plant, although lower than average, but higher than the, 6 pounds when the average was 6.4. So just barely below average. The fruits scored well in some of the quality traits, and had a somewhat larger than average fruit size.
Stay right there.
Piroca. This is another variety from Adaptive. It had a somewhat large fruit size, smallish fruit size, and is originally from a biodynamic breeding company in Germany, Bingenheimer. Ruth's Perfect, living up to its name, has scored highly for almost all of the quality traits. The yield has been a little bit lower per plant, and it has had the highest rating in the trial for bricks. Most of the fruits have been marketable, or all. Most of them. Well, highest percent marketable, 97%, pretty darn high. West Virginia 63 has, that's another variety from Southern Exposure, also on Andrew Still's recommendation. This fruit has had a little bit of zippering, you can see, that's what we call zippering. Easy to harvest, also a high bricks. Big Beef, this is kind of a market standard for high tunnel growers. It's a hybrid. We sourced the seed from Johnny's. It's been around for a long time. Across the board has done well in our trials. So far it has yielded an average of just under 11 pounds per plant when the average was 6.4 pounds. It's rated well in all categories except for bricks, appearance, flavor, and texture, but that's a lot of categories. It rated really well for skin thickness, sugar acid balance, easy to harvest, good percent marketable weight, and good fruit size. Cayman, this is breeding work from Vitalis. I think we got this seed from High Mowing. This has yielded well, large fruit size. It's actually, this and Mashenka have been tied for the largest fruit size, outdoing Big Beef, which is kind of surprising. It has done well in almost all of the categories. We've found some of the fruits to rot when they touch the ground, but the yield, despite the rotting on the ground, has still been really high. It also has rated best for flavor in our trials. Earthworks breeding lines, these are two of Earthworks breeding lines. They have yielded well, high percentage of the fruits have been marketable. We found 225 to be easy to harvest, but 206 to be harder to harvest. The bricks on both is 4.5, above average. We liked the looks of the 206 more than the 225, although looking at them now, I'm not sure why. They both look great. Thanks Earthworks for providing those. Illini Star. This one was, of our open pollinated varieties, this one rated best across all categories except for fruit size. Small size, but high yield, good percentage have been marketable, great flavor, good appearance. There's a little bit of this, I don't know what you call that, brown spotting, speckling. But other than that, the fruits have been marketable, delicious, good yield. That was also on Andrew's recommendation, sourced from Southern Exposure.
And then we want to show you a few that we've been growing in the greenhouse just in some extra spaces for our own eating enjoyment that are not in the trial. We also just got a comment that small size is better for the Pacific Northwest, and that is generally true. You get higher yields, more sugar content, and this is a great example. This is one called Snowberry that we have been growing for mostly just for our own eating, and in what we call the lunch garden. It's really delicious, very productive. We've actually been taking some notes on it this year and doing some weights as we do with all the other varieties. So we'll have a little more sort of yield information to share with you on that. But that's one that we just personally enjoy and wanted to encourage you to try if you like to grow the smaller tomatoes, and especially if you're looking for a good yellow to grow. And then this one is new to us this year, a Zoychka. And Jim Myers just asked if any of these are parthenocarpic, and not that I know of. Parthenocarpy is a trait that allows for fruit set without seed set. So you can actually get fruit without an effective fertilization. And I don't know that any of these varieties are. If anyone else knows, feel free to chime in. This variety, one of our field interns this year introduced us to this variety, Zoychka, and it's truly magnificent. It's delicious. It's got that heirloom quality to it. It's been pretty productive, and it's really just a truly delightful yellow. So if you're looking for a yellow tomato to try, obviously this was not part of our trial, didn't fit our trial qualities for this year, but is a great one to try if you're looking for something new.
Have you mentioned some of our winners from previous years?
No.
You go ahead.
Oh, Matina is our Pacific Northwest standard, small fruited, potato leafed, indeterminate variety that has done well for us outside and tasted good. Again, reinforcing the idea that small fruits do better in the Pacific Northwest. We also have really loved Fireworks from Adaptive. We've trialed it as part of our late blight trials outside for years. It is not particularly late blight resistant, but it's so early that it produces these big, beautiful fruits before the late blight even sets in. There was one other that did Silettes. It's really similar to Fireworks. I can't remember. Neither of them tasted great in the field, but one of them tasted better than the other, and I can't remember which one. I wish I had that information.
And both of those varieties, Silettes and Fireworks, come out of the Oregon State University breeding program, and there's some really wonderful material.
Yeah, one word of caution with those, even though they do produce fruits outside early, they can, because they are not at all late blight resistant, they can spread the late blight to other field tomatoes that are later ripening.
Thank you all for joining us. We will be releasing variety trial reports, sharing this year's results and also some of the results of our collaborators that I mentioned. So check out our website at seedalliance.org to sign up for our newsletter, hear when our trial reports come out, and also follow us on eOrganic. If you search for either NOVIC or TOMI on eOrganic, you'll find our website there, and you'll be able to source some of the variety trial reports from all of the collaborating partners as well. Anything else you want to share?
Yeah. Okay. So actually, Jim Myers has corrected me. Fireworks is not from Oregon State University material, but
Don't you love having a breeder?
Silettes is. So thank you, Jim, for that. And we're going to finish up today with Katie telling us a little bit about some of the new reduced tillage practices that we have been doing here, both in the greenhouse and out in the field.
Okay, so you look down at this row here, and it might look like we've spread a layer of mulch. This isn't, it is mulch, but we didn't go and buy a bale of hay and spread it after we planted the tomatoes. We seeded a cover crop of rye and vetch after we cleared out the greenhouse in the fall. That rye and vetch grew through the winter. It got tall, about as tall as me. And then right before we planted the tomatoes, we mowed it down with a rotary mower. We took the tractor into the greenhouse, which is a little funny, but we have wide doors, so it works. Then we took some old greenhouse plastic. We've had the misfortune of losing our greenhouse plastic in windstorms, but it means that we can use it for our reduced tillage methods later on. Took the old greenhouse plastic, laid it out on the killed rye and vetch, which solarized everything, completely killing the rye and vetch. Just a week later, it dies very quickly with the greenhouse plastic and the plastic. It gets really hot in here, kind of cooks everything. Pulled that plastic off, and then came through with a 3-tined subsoiler that we borrowed from Sunfield, a school just down the street, and we ripped lines in the soil. We had to use 3 because we couldn't take the tines off. We use what we have. Ripped lines into the soil and just planted the tomatoes directly into those ripped lines. It worked really well, reducing the amount of tillage that we needed to use in the greenhouse. We have been transitioning slowly away from using a rototiller out in the field also, and this was the first year that we were able to do that on any scale. We were able to use the same method to prepare the beds for the sweet corn trial, the dry corn, the cabbages, the purple sprouting broccoli, the collards, and the carrot trial. We only used the rototiller in the early spring when we needed to prepare beds quickly for trials that were being planned and executed last minute. So the tarping and ripping is a somewhat slow process out in the field, but can be done really quickly in the greenhouse.
So we just got a question, and we're just going to reiterate this. The question was, did we mow before we covered it in plastic? And yes, we did. We mowed, and then we used the greenhouse plastic. And we're going to just take a little walk out into the field and show you what that looks like in the field as well. We've used landscape fabric in the field. We haven't tried the silage tarp.
Farmers use silage tarp.
Is another great product you can use. This is some purple sprouting broccoli that was recently planted with that same technique, and you can see there's a little bit of weeds coming up right in the planting line where we've got some irrigation on it, but it's been really great for weed management and weed suppression. And so we're also just going to give you a little preview right here. Tomorrow is all about brassicas. So we're going to talk to you about cabbage, collards, purple sprouting broccoli. We're going to have some harvested cabbage to show you, and we'll talk about all the things we're looking for and what the background of those projects and trials are. So we hope you all have a wonderful day. It's a little bit smoky. Stay safe. Malcolm says hello to everyone. He'll see you tomorrow.
We hope everybody is staying safe and well. We did just release a blog post recently that includes some suggestions of how you can support farmers that are impacted by both COVID and the fires going on right now, and some resources for farmers. So if you're in a dire situation in your farming operation affected by the fires, check out our blog post at seedalliance.org on resources for dealing with the climatic issues we're all dealing with right now. Stay safe. We'll see you tomorrow at 10 a.m.
Okay.